Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks for hanging out with us. This is our brand new computer that we just upgraded to for the webcast. It's a lot faster, so we should have a lot smoother streams. But as with everything, and as many of you who have done astrophotography, you can understand that it's always a driver. Always a driver or USB is what screws up everything. So, anyway, that is all fixed. Thank you very much for hanging out with us, waiting for this to get here. So apologies for the delay. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right in it. Welcome to the What's Up Webcast. My name is Kevin Lagore. I'm the product specialist for Skywatcher here in North America. And this is the What's Up Webcast. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel. If you like what you see here, go ahead and subscribe. It does help out the channel and keeps us doing these episodes. So if you enjoy what you see here, please hit subscribe. And it definitely helps us out. So it keeps this going. The What's Up Webcast, we cover everything from what's up into the nighttime sky to equipment to helpful tips and tricks for observing and imaging. And at the last Friday of each month, we have a special guest on to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. So with all that being said, it is Friday, first Friday of the month, which means we're checking out what's up in the nighttime sky. And it's July. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. So let's just dive right into it since we're 15 minutes late starting. So first off is the big bright thing in the nighttime sky, the moon. We start with this every first of the month because that's the biggest and easiest thing to see for people. So the moon obviously goes through phases. We have new moon being the darkest portion of the month, and then we have full moon being the brightest portion of the month. So for many astronomers, the highlight of the month is new moon, where it's dark. You're getting out to a nice dark sky, doing some observing, seeing the Milky Way right now, and all kinds of other faint things in the nighttime sky. So the new moon for this month is July 9th. So that's coming up. And that would make the dark sky weekend next weekend. So hopefully you can be making your plans. That would be the 10th and the 11th of the month. So if you don't have any plans, now's the time to make it. Get out to your favorite observing site. I would love to get out to a dark sky site, but here in Arizona, it's monsoon season and half the state's on fire. So that's just how it works. Full moon for July is the 23rd, so a couple weeks out. The moon is actually getting out of the nighttime sky as we move into the new moon phase, where a couple weeks we'll get back to that big bright full moon on July 23rd. Now, like I said, full moon, July 23rd. It is the buck, B as in boy, buck moon. This is basically where male deer antlers are pretty much full grown, and that is the name of the month of July's full moon. And other names, depending on which tribe or region that you're in, the full moon has its own name, and these full moons can be, the names do vary depending on region. We also have the salmon moon, the berry moon, and if you want to know where I get all these weird names, if you're not really familiar with them, maybe you want to bring that up with an outreach event or something like that. You want to know the folklore behind some of the moon names. I go to a website called Farmer's Almanac. I'm just going to bring up the whole thing here. Never mind. There we go. I use Farmer's Almanac. It's got all kinds of fun stuff in there. Where's the moon astronomy? Full moon calendar. It has all kinds of stuff in there that's kind of neat to talk about. But yeah, that's where I get all the names of the full moon. It tells you some of the folklore behind it. That's what I use. So there you go. So that is the full moon occurring on July 23rd. So we've got a couple weeks out until it gets nice and bright in the sky to see that and obstructs all those cool faint fuzzies that we want to see. But that is the full moon for the month. Next up, planets. It's getting to be planet season again. We've got a collection of them up. These for the evenings. Venus right now, if you haven't been out, is easily naked eye visible in the western part of the sky just after sunset. It's currently in a gibbous phase, so it's quite bright. There's not a lot of detail that can be seen, but it is still a fun object to catch in telescopes, and it'll be well visible for the entire month of July. I'm gonna bring up where'd it go? Sorry, I'm still messing with this computer. Let me bring up Stellarium here because it was supposed to come up and it didn't. So let me bring up my little planisphere planetarium software. Can't think this morning. There we go. This was opened and the computer decided not to listen to me. Come on, thing. There we go. Sorry about that. And let's get to the time. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. So this is about 8:30 this evening. We have Mars still visible in the western part of the sky. We'll talk about that next. But if we make this a little earlier, there we go. Venus is visible usually just after sunset. You can catch that in the western part of the sky. Big, bright, easy to see. I'm sure you've had many of your friends ask you, what's that weird thing in the west? It's not a plane, not a UFO, it's Venus. But Venus is going to be visible for the next couple of months. So let me just pan through here. It's going to be making its way to the west and getting much brighter as it gets closer to us, but it will be shifting further and further to the west over the next few months as we move into August. So that's not going anywhere. It's going to get brighter as it gets closer. So let me get back to where we are now. But that is the planet Venus. It's a cool one to check out. And yeah, just keep an eye on that for the upcoming months and check it out. Next up, like I said, we have Mars. Mars right now is pretty much finally at the end of its season. It's really not in a good position to get anything out of it. It's been moving away from us for probably the last 6 months. It was really good in the fall of 2020, and there's just not much to see anymore. It's moved past its opposition. It's moving away from us. It's also getting low in the western sky. There's not a lot of detail that can be seen, and now it's in a really crappy part of the sky because it's low. So we are finally wrapping up with the Mars season. We'll get it back in 2022. So if you missed Mars, you're just going to have to wait till next year to get a good shot at it again because we are finished with it. However, now that we've talked about Venus and Mars, over the next week, not this week, let me look at my calendar here. Next weekend. So yeah, next weekend, the early part of the following week, starting around the 12th, right after sunset, we're going to get a kind of a cool collection of conjunctions going on. If you don't know what a conjunction is, that's just a close, collection of celestial objects. Let's see. We're going to get some cool stuff here. So Kodak moment, photo op, whatever the heck you want to call it. We're going to have the moon and Venus ultra thin crescent on the 11th. Probably easier to catch crescent on the 12th, but that's going to be kind of cool to be able to catch those two. Let me get this a little later. But what we missed there is the planet Mars is actually going to be right next to Venus. Very, very close. And over those few days, so there it is on the 11th, you're going to have a razor-thin crescent, Venus and Mars right in a row. Kind of a cool photo op there. That'll be right around 8 o'clock. It's going to be low, so make sure you have a good western horizon. I have this stupid virtual tree in the way, which I could just sit here and virtually cut it down. Because it's in the way. So landscapes, we'll just go to Mars. I live in Arizona. It looks the same. So there we go. No more virtual tree. Gone. See, other than the rover there, if you're in the middle of the desert here in Arizona, it looks very similar. So, um, anyway, this is what we're looking at on the 11th. So if you've got a cool western horizon there, you're going to have an awesome photo op there. So you have the crescent moon, Venus, Mars right in a row. And then Mars and Venus will continue to be pretty close to each other for the next couple of days, probably throughout the week. But your closest shots are going to be, the 10th isn't bad, 11th's really good, 12th is amazing, 13th not too bad, and then they start moving away from each other as the month goes on, as Mars goes low and Venus starts to head towards the west, like due west. So that's some of the one cool conjunction that's going to be floating around in the next week or so. You get rid of that. So that's Mars. Glad it's gone. Tired of answering questions about a planet that there's not a lot of detail on. Unless it's close, then it's awesome. But when it's not close, it's not any fun to look at. Jupiter's back. If you are up in the later part of the evening, actually Saturn's going to beat it first, but I do these in position from the sun. I guess I should have done it there. This is late in the month, right around the 20th. Jupiter's just starting to come into the nighttime sky in the late evening. Right around 10 o'clock is when we're going to start getting Jupiter at the end of the month. It's not really going to be high enough to really get some good viewing on it until late in the evening. Early in the month, you're still looking at almost 11 o'clock by the time it's high enough to really get a nice view of it. But that's Jupiter. Jupiter is finally back in the later evening skies. So there you go. Now, my favorite planet, of course many of others, is Saturn. Saturn is actually heading Jupiter right now. So it's up a little bit earlier. Let's rewind here, not that far. So right around 10 o'clock in the eastern part, you can get Saturn. It's sitting out there in the east. By the end of the month, it's going to be, let's go all the way to the end of the month. It's above the horizon by 8. By 9 o'clock, you can start probably getting some nice views of it. And by 10 o'clock, you're in a very good position to start viewing Saturn. So as we move into July, we'll get some of our, real stunning planets back in the nighttime sky. And as we get into August, it'll be a very good time to start catching some of those planets. But Jupiter and Saturn are going to be the major, planetary jewels, and they're going to be basically hanging out with each other this season. Saturn will be trailing Jupiter, and of course, as we move later into the year, they're going to start getting closer to each other. I believe there is going to be a conjunction to some extent. Obviously, not what we did in December. That was like once in a lifetime, but they're going to be hanging out really close to each other over the next few months, and they're just starting to make their way into the nighttime sky this month, and even better and more visible for people to see at a more convenient time by the end of the month around 10 o'clock. So that is Jupiter and Saturn. And that kind of wraps it up for the planets, but at least we're getting some naked eye planets back. It's a fun one to share, especially if you just got your telescope for the holidays and this is like your first year of astronomy. Now we're getting to that season where we've got some cool stuff to see in the world of planets. So, something kind of cool there. All right, the sun. I don't change these slides because it's kind of the same thing. Activity on the sun is increasing, but slowly. You got some good prominences and active regions, but nothing major currently. It just pops up every now and again. So it's something that you kind of just got to pay attention to. And it's, again, it's just, you got to pay attention to it. And the way I go about it is, it's also good for sketching and imaging and stuff like that. But the way I look at it is I go to this website. I Google Gong H alpha. And this shows you the current what's going on in hydrogen alpha. Um, the sun has a fair amount of detail going on right now. Nothing monumental, but we do have a nice sunspot region right here. There's a good active region there, some filaments right now. This is current. This is from Chile. This one was updated about about 3 minutes ago. This updates very, very quickly. So if you're looking to do some solar observing, particularly in hydrogen alpha, highly recommend it. This is the website I use to see if it's worth hauling out all the gear to take a look at if it's not set up. But the sun is kicking up, so it's definitely worth checking out. There's a lot of cool detail up there right now. Here's a sharper one. You can see there's a ton of detail in this active region around the sunspot right there. So some nice prominences are visible. These filaments, if you have like a double stack filter or a narrower band pass, there's some cool filaments there. So some good stuff up here, small active region there and there. So there's all kinds of stuff happening on the sun right now, especially in hydrogen alpha. If you do have a white light filter, you can catch this sunspot. So there's kind of something for everyone up right now as far as the sun goes. But it's definitely a good time to get out and observe the sun, unless you live where I live or Oregon. It's just too hot. So, but you get out there early. Generally, observing the sun I would do before 11 a.m. Because the seeing is generally fairly stable early in the morning. But do double check if you want the best seeing conditions. Double check like your seeing monitors and stuff like that on like clear sky clocks to see when the seeing is generally best to get the sharpest image of the sun. And then wear sunscreen, because solar astronomy is the only carcinogenic form of astronomy. So there you go. So that's the sun. Meteor showers. There's not a lot going on right now. This is all leading up to August, which has the premier Perseid meteor shower. But this month we have the Delta Aquariids. You're looking at the 28th and 29th. The moon's going to be pretty bright around there. We only get about 10 to 20 meteors per hour. It's best viewed before dawn, but you're going to have to compete with the sun there. So this one's not going to be mind-blowing. But if you do find yourself out and about, there's something to take a look at if you're going to be out there. But yeah, there's not a lot to see for the Delta Aquariids. It is a smaller meteor shower, not super bright, and then of course when you're competing with a bright moon, it's going to be hard. So but hopefully next month, I haven't looked at the details, but we're looking at the Perseid meteor shower next month, which is the premier meteor shower of the year. So hopefully the details for that will be better. We'll check that out next month in August. Comets. There's no reason for me to do slides on comets because they change so often, and this is what I use. Let me get rid of all of this. This is called cometchasing.skyhound.com. It gives you a list and details of all the current visible comets. It's really the best website that I've found, and it breaks it down really nicely. We start with the Northern Hemisphere comets. This is basically a list of all the recommended comets that are visible right now, and then gives you some minor details about those comets or comets that might be of interest coming up. And then if you scroll down a little bit, the ones that are visible right now, it's going to give you more detail about, you know, where it's visible depending on the latitude, you know, magnitude that they're visible at, and then kind of what telescopes you could use right now. They normally start with the brightest comet visible and then work their way down, and then it does switch to Southern Hemisphere as well as you move down. So keep an eye depending on where you're living. But what's also cool about this is they give you these really nice detailed star charts. They do a really good job here. So this is C2020 T2 Palomar. I believe it said this is a 10.5 magnitude, so you're looking at probably a 6-inch telescope from a nicer dark sky. And it's not visible in super far north latitudes, but as you move further south, so it looks like for most of the continental US down here, you'd be able to catch some at twilight. It is near Virgo. It's between Virgo and Buddhist, so you should be able to catch it. I don't think it's a very big comet, but you could take a look at that, maybe snap a picture of that with your imaging gear. But that's a pretty good comet that's up. That actually looks to be the brightest comet that's visible right now, because then after that, well, I guess this one would be 10.2 would be that. And you have 10.5, but then you dip into almost 11th and 13th magnitude on these, where you're going to need bigger, 12-inch plus instruments, and you'll just have to pay attention at the time, because a lot of time comets are visible right after dusk and right before sunrise is the best time to be hunting comets, because of their positioning and how the sun lights them up. But this gives you the details on all of the current visible comets. So if you like comets and you like observing them, this is where I would go to see what's currently out there and what's maybe worth taking a look at. Or you can find your own comet. But I haven't found one either. So, but yeah, this is where I would go to check out comets. So that's it for the comet weather of the day. And now we're done with that. Deep sky. It is a crazy collection of objects. I could go forever on deep sky targets. Of course, right now we have the Milky Way. The summer Milky Way is up. You're heading to dark skies. I mean, this is really the premier thing this time of year. So let me bring up Stellarium here real quick. If you're in a nice dark sky in the next week or two, the Milky Way is coming up. It's visible right after sunset practically. So there's 8 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, it's dark. This is rising in the east. You've got the Milky Way core. Let me back this up. Oop, there we go. But yeah, as we move towards, new moon weekend, so next weekend, by 10 o'clock, it's like premier Milky Way season right now. You've got Scorpio and Sagittarius. All the cool gems of the summer Milky Way are going to be hanging out up here. You have M24, the Sagittarius star cloud, M17, the Swan, 16, the Eagle. You have M8, the Lagoon, M20, the Trifid Nebula. You move down here. I think you've got, I believe this is M7 right down here. You've got the False Comet, which is right down here in the tail. I forgot the name of this IC or NGC nebula that's a part of the False Comet. It's right there. Got this. Gonna let me click on it. Whatever. But that's the False Comet down in Scorpio's tail. There's all kinds of cool stuff, as well as the dark nebulas, and of course the Rho Ophiuchus Nebula region around Antares. There's all kinds of amazing things up in the Milky Way. Or you can just do wide field Milky Way. Grab yourself a 14, 20, 24 millimeter lens, a star tracker like our Star Adventurer, and go out and take some cool Milky Way shots and share them with us. But there's a ton of stuff up, and it's going to be up for the next couple months. The summer Milky Way really dominates the nighttime sky. We're in July right now. August, it's, right after dark, it's overhead. September and pretty much into October, you have a good chunk of the Milky Way visible. So for the next couple months, it's going to be some awesome stuff to see, especially if you get to dark skies. So definitely worth it. It's summer Milky Way season. There's a lot of people that say it's Milky Way season. It's also in the winter. It's just not as bright and detailed as the summer is, but it's worth it. As far as objects go, you can never go wrong with M57, the Ring Nebula. That's in the constellation of Lyra the Harp. It's about 1,400 light years away. It's an easy pick at a 6-inch aperture telescope. I remember finding it my first time with a 6-inch telescope in my front yard years ago. So if you have, you just got a 6 or 8-inch telescope like a Dob, and you want to go check out an easy planetary, the Ring Nebula is excellent to see. If you want to get structure and the central star, you're really going to need probably about a 14-inch telescope or bigger. It's like 15th magnitude, so it's relatively hard to see. Some magnification would be nice on that. if you're planning to image the Ring Nebula, it is small. It's a tiny target, so I'd probably recommend about 1,000 mm focal length. And like I said, you can easily find it. Doesn't take a lot of, let me too far. It's right up here. You find let's actually find this. Boop, constellations, and just for the heck of it, labels. You're gonna find the bright star Vega, and then you'll find the box just below Vega, and then opposite that, you're gonna have I believe it's Chiliac and Sulfat. I could butcher that all day long. You're gonna find those two stars basically opposite opposite Vega, on the opposite end of the constellation. About halfway between those two stars, you're gonna find M57, the Ring Nebula. So that's a really fun one to look for, but it can be difficult to catch. You just want to make sure you take your time. It can look like a star if you're going too quick, but if you go slow, visually looking for it, you will notice it's more of a ghostly looking, Cheerio looking thing, as opposed to the pinpoint or stellar appearing objects in the rest of the field. But that's a great object to look for this time of year. Another real showstopper, very easy to find, probably one of the best objects for a beginner, is M13, the Hercules star cluster. Constellation is Hercules, of course, about 22,000 light years away, roughly about 1 million stars. You can see this naked eye from a dark sky. It looks like a little fuzzy, but it's easily visible in most observing conditions, even with small optics like a 50 mm pair of binoculars. But the bigger the telescope, the more impressive that it gets. It does have this really unique little feature in here. There's three little dark lanes in there. It's called the propeller. That's kind of a fun little detail to see inside of M13, as well as its little companion. It's not technically a companion because it sits millions of light years behind the cluster, but you can see the smaller galaxy there. If you've got a big enough telescope, probably about 12-inch or bigger, in good dark skies, you can get that detail in there. For imaging, really any focal length around 500 or longer was going to do a nice shot. I think this was done with like a C14 Hyperstar, and that was like 700 or so millimeter. I have to do the math again, but 600 to 800 millimeters with a smaller chip. This worked really well. But it's a really easy object to shoot, even if you're in a light polluted location. If you're looking for something to do imaging wise, that's easy. That light pollution won't affect the shot a whole bunch. M13 is a great imaging target to get this time of year, and it's really well positioned right now in the northern hemisphere, practically straight up after dark. It's a little bit past zenith actually, but it's right here. So the way to find it is to find Hercules, the hero, and then find the 4 body stars. This is making the box of the body. That's called the keystone. And then you find Corona Borealis, and basically that loops you around and points you right to the cluster. So it's a fun one to learn how to star hop as well if you don't have GoTo. Highly recommend learning the constellations and learning how to star hop. But it's a very easy object to catch, and it's a good one to share with the family because it's impressive and it's easy to find, and it's not tremendously difficult to see something that's so far away and kind of unique. So that is M13. M27, the dumbbell, is very similar to the Ring Nebula. The Ring Nebula, however, we're looking right down the center of the nebula, where M27 we're looking from the side is how they're positioned. I like to call it the apple core nebula because if you actually look at it in a telescope, it looks like an apple core. All this faint detail, these wings are really more of an imaging target there. This is 1,360 light years away in the constellation of Vulpecca, just below Albireo, not too far from Albireo in the constellation of Cygnus. It's a pretty easy one to find. So let's see. I just said that. Now I can't find it. There it is. So yeah, you find Deneb, then go up. There's Albireo. Vulpecca is this amazing constellation of a line 2 stars. Drop down from Vulpecca, just above Sagittaea, the arrow. You'll find that it might take a little hunting. It's a lot bigger than the Ring Nebula is, though, so it's a lot easier to find. I find it's easier to see in like a finder scope because of its size being so much bigger. You can see it in a 50 millimeter finder. Filters for this, as well as like the Ring Nebula, if you're in like a light polluted sky and you need a little bit of extra punch to get through the light pollution, an oxygen 3 filter is excellent, or an ultra high contrast or UHC is a very good filter as well for those nebulas. So that's what I would recommend for looking at these objects visually. In a dark sky site, they really don't need much assistance. Especially the Dumbbell Nebula, it's very impressive in like a 6-inch telescope or bigger. And then if you have some serious aperture, it gets, you just get more of that molting detail in it. And then the central star is a bit easier to see on this one than the Ring Nebula is. Imagers. This one's good in visible light, like red LRGB or a color camera. It's also excellent target for narrowband. This is a bicolor image, just oxygen 3 and hydrogen alpha. And you can actually see those wings there. The wings are primarily double ionized oxygen, so you want to use an O3 filter and probably a fair amount of exposure time for the O3 channel to bring that out, or some really good luminance data if you're going to be shooting this in color. So I would wait till new moon or dark skies to get, if you're doing LRGB, good luminance data on it, or if you're shooting in town, then a set of nice narrowband filters will help you get a good shot. So that would work. Yes, Jupiter, if you have a filter, those generally screw on the bottom of your eyepiece there, so you should be able to just get that filter and thread it on the bottom, and that'll help. I would like to note, oxygen 3 filters tend to cut a fair amount of light out, so you'd probably want to have an 8-inch telescope or bigger to really take advantage of these filters. But they're a must-have, in my opinion, for any visual astronomer who likes doing deep sky, is the O3 filter and the UHC filter. And then, of course, you can get an H-beta filter down the road. But the UHC and O3s are a must, in my opinion, if you're actually real serious about deep sky observing, especially if you've got a big telescope to back them up. I highly, highly, highly recommend those filters. All right, the Trifid Nebula, one of my favorite nebulas in the nighttime sky. It's in Sagittarius, not far from the Lagoon Nebula. This is 5,200 light years away. It's an excellent object for a 6-inch telescope and larger. It's actually a little bit more impressive if you could get to darker skies and have probably a 15-inch telescope, 12-inch telescope or bigger, just because some of the details in there are fainter, and it is low on the south, so having that extra punch is very helpful. It's a very nice imaging object. It's in a very complex star field. There's a lot of dark nebulas in this region, a lot of stars. There's a lot of nebulosity in there, but then this nebula has a bunch of other detail in it. So I'm actually going to bring the full resolution shot in here. So this is the Trifid Nebula. We shot this a couple weeks ago, actually. It was taken on an Esprit 150 triplet with a ZWO 6200 monochrome camera with chroma LRGB filters. Few hours of exposure time. But what's cool about the Trifid Nebula is it basically has all 3 types of nebulas in it. The pink portion of the nebula is the emission nebula, or the star forming region. The blue, which you can actually see almost encompasses the entire nebula itself, is a reflection nebula, so it's dust that starlight is reflecting off of. And then you have the dark lanes in there. Those are dark nebulas. That actually is a Barnard Nebula, or B Nebula. I want to say it's B86, but I could be incorrect. Dark nebulas are really great this time of year because you do have the Milky Way arms visible right now. There's all kinds of cool things visible right there. But the Trifid is an awesome, awesome object to check out. So highly recommend checking that out. You are going to want to make sure that your telescope is corrected with the field flattener because of how complex the star field is. You're going to know really, really quick that your positioning or spacing on your corrector is wrong if you do not have that correct right now because of how complex the star fields are. So that's the Trifid Nebula. It is a great narrow band. If you want to do like a Hubble palette, HA03S2, you could do something crazy like that. But it's a really nice object just in natural color. There's so much elegant detail in here that it's definitely worth it. So that is the Trifid Nebula, or M20, one of my favorites. However, my favorite object of all time is the Veil Nebula. The Veil Nebula is in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. It's about 2,000 light years away. It is a supernova remnant, so massive star died long ago, detonating, shedding out all this material out into space. You do need about a 6-inch telescope if you really want to get the best detail in each portion of the Veil Nebula, because it is a very large nebula covering about 3.5 degrees. Very, very cool nebula. You can see this in like a 4-inch telescope from dark skies, and if you have a very wide field of view telescope that gives you a large chunk of sky, about 3 degrees, you can get the whole view of it, and it's an amazing imaging target. I'm actually going to show you a mosaic that I've been working on using our Esprit 150 and the ZWO 6200 camera. This is a project I'm still working on. I think this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 panel mosaic right now. I think this is like a 350 megapixel image. Right now this is just the luminance channel for this shot. I'm going to colorize it and then I'll share it with everybody later. I might add a few more panels, but ran out of time basically to get all my luminance data last month, so now we've got to go back and finish up some of the stuff. But this is the entire Veil Nebula complex as opposed to the portion I've got right there. This is the Western Veil. This right here is a bright naked-eyed star. Let me actually pull this up so you know where it's at. This is in the constellation of Cygnus, right down here on the eastern wing of Cygnus. You're going to find this bright star, and then there's another bright star, 52 Cygni, which is naked eye, which is this one right here. If you can find 52 Cygni, you can find the Veil Nebula and the massive complex that it actually is. So, like I said, this image is huge, 350 megapixel shot, so at 1.4 arc seconds per pixel. So this is 52 Cygni. This is just luminance data. This was shot at a Bortle 2 sky, so very, very dark sky as well. But what's fantastic about this nebula is how complex and elegant some of the details here in this nebula are. So this is actually broken up into a couple pieces. You have the Western Veil Nebula, and then you have the Eastern Veil, also called the Network Nebula. This is, you need about 3.5 degrees to get this whole field of view with about a UHC or an O3 filter. You want to have low power eyepieces for this, even in a Dob or probably something like a 35 millimeter eyepieces, wide field, something, because you want low power. Dark skies would be recommended. If you get to a dark sky and have like a 12-inch telescope or something like that, what's really cool about this is you can start to see a lot of these little streamers and filaments in this nebula. It's a very complex region. Then, of course, you have the second part here. That's Pickering's Triangle, which is more of that, supernova remnant. And then, of course, you have the Network Nebula, or the Eastern Veil, right next door. But a lot of this just looks like paint strokes, like very, very delicate detail. But if you have the advantage of getting a very large telescope, like a 20-inch on it, a lot of these little details are visible from a very dark sky. It's really impressive. One of my favorite regions of the nighttime sky because of how complex and elegant a lot of these details are. So you could spend a fair amount of time observing this. Take a wide field telescope, get the whole thing, or take a big telescope and actually take a tour of the veil, showing all the major pieces of the night of that nebula right there. So that's NGC 6960 over here, and you have NGC 6992/95 slash a bunch of other NGCs over here, and then Pickering's Triangle and all these other little marked pieces that are part of the Veil Nebula. But that is the Veil Nebula right there. It does really well in hydrogen alpha, so if you want to image this from home, an H alpha filter and a narrow O3 filter would work, but even a black and white image with H alpha, it's amazing. Or if you're in a dark sky, a really nice color image of this would be excellent. So that is the Veil Nebula right there, the entire complex of the Veil. Good luck. So, okay. We're going to get on to some stranger things. So we've been hanging around in the Milky Way right here. And a lot of us, I think this time of year, including myself up to a couple weeks ago, are normally so busy looking at Scorpio and Sagittarius, Ophiuchus, Cygnus. You know, we still have Hercules, and we still have like Virgo and Ursa Major. There's all these crazy things that are up right now that are just like eye candy objects. And there's half a dozen objects I didn't even mention in this presentation because there's so much stuff up right now. But there's all kinds of amazing things that are visible right now. However, on the northern part of the sky, especially if you're an imager and you're looking for some really challenging, faint, oddball stuff, you want to step over to the constellation of Cepheus, the hero. And Cepheus just sits behind Deneb. It's not far from the northern pole around Polaris, but around 10 o'clock, Cepheus is getting high enough to where you can start imaging a lot of the targets in this region. And Cepheus is just off the plane of the Milky Way, but there's a lot of dusty, strange, dark reflection nebulas in this area that are very complex and very challenging objects to work with and even capture. You could try doing these visually, but they are going to be a bit of a challenge. The first one is NGC 7023, the Iris Nebula, about 1,300 light years away. You can probably see this with a 6-inch telescope. This is one of the easier objects in this region to see visually because it has this bright reflection portion in the center of it. But all this really faint dust, if you're a very advanced, very careful observer, you might be able to pick up some of these faint, dusty details in there, but it takes a lot of time, and I would recommend holding the telescope and moving it back and forth to watch what moves with the field, but you might be able to pick up some of these really faint, dusty nebulas that are floating out in here. These are molecular clouds, very complex nebulas with all kinds of material inside of them, but very cool. Most of the constellation of Cepheus is filled with this stuff. So if you ever take a really wide field shot of this area, like the whole constellation, you'd see all kinds of these molecular clouds floating around in that region. So it's a really cool part of the sky. A lot of people think this is a fall constellation, but by the time, fall comes around, Cepheus is already, high in the sky and almost setting. In some places, it's moving towards setting. It's past the meridian, so it's on the western part of the sky. It's setting. But what I've actually found on accident was if you want to start really imaging these things and getting a good project going, now would be the time to actually start while the constellation is still rising, and you've got most of the night to actually shoot this region of the sky. But a lot of people are so busy observing all these highlight targets, and for good reason, you miss the constellation of Cepheus and a lot of the neat things that are inside of there. So just something I kind of found over the last couple of weeks while I was imaging I didn't think this was up, but I was actually surprised it was, so shot this. Now, if you want something very similar that's even more complex in the same region, you can get into the LDN nebulas. This is 1235, the Shark Nebula. I only have the head of it. It actually is quite long, so you really want a wider field if you could. Probably something like, this is 1,000 millimeters with a full frame sensor. Probably something like a 600 millimeter focal length with at least like a 4/3 sensor. Dark skies, you could get this whole portion. It's got some really nice reflection nebulas in there from these stars that are lighting up some of the dust in there. Again, a very complex region. It's very faint. This is probably something that you need to image from actually, you have to image this from a dark sky site. These types of nebulas, these molecular clouds, only really pop when you have a strong luminance layer in there. Narrowband filters, these are invisible. You might be able to pick up a little bit in hydrogen, but they really don't emit light in that frequency. So you have to just have dark skies for these types of nebulas. You could try seeing these visually, but these are going to be a really big challenge. I would recommend exceptionally dark skies and high altitude locations for really good clarity of the nighttime sky. You need to make sure that everything is on your side to get something like this, as they are very challenging. And if you're trying to image this from the city, I could see how a gradient would, from city lights or some weird gradient in your image would really affect some of this stuff. And there's so much dust and faint detail in here. Let me just actually bring up the actual picture here. It almost looks like there's a gradient in here, but it's not. It's all dust. So you want to be very careful when you're processing these images. A lot of people will set their black point. If you're an astrophotographer, you know what that means, but you'll set your black point to the darkest part and you'll lose all this really elegant faint detail that's in there. So you want to be careful when you're working with these molecular cloud shots up in Cepheus and other regions, that you don't kill off the really faint details that are in here, because it takes a lot of work to get these images. You want to bring out as much detail, and it can be difficult to balance out the brighter regions with these faint dust details. But yeah, doing on this. So that is the Shark LDN 1235. Go for it. Challenge target of the month. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That's pretty much it for the webcast today. Thanks very much for putting up with all the technical crap. New computer. Think we're done with all of it. If you like what you see here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You can still reach us at support@skywatcherusa.com. I do have to update that. It should be info@skywatcherusa.com if you're writing about the webcast. But if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and let us know. We have a lot of cool things coming up this month. We've got some cool speakers that are lined up. We have updated everything out until, I think, September. So if you go to the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel, you can see all of our upcoming episodes. We've got a lot of people lined up, a lot of cool episodes. I'm going to bring this up real quick. If you're not sure where to go for this, you're going to go to the Skywatcher USA channel. And of course, we have our videos. They're all there right there. But if you want to see what's coming up, you want to hit upcoming live streams, and then that'll show you the schedule. So next week, we're talking about the Evo Guide 50DX, our little 50 millimeter APO. After that, we're doing the SkyX from Software Biz. That's the software we use. Monochrome versus color cameras. That should be a really good one. We have Dr. Vishnu Reddy. Need to fix that, actually. Vishnu Reddy from University of Arizona. Flex tube Dobbs are coming up. Optical cleaning. We're going to do an episode on that. My buddy Gil Esquierdo, who is a observer at Mount Hopkins on the 60-inch telescope. He'll be there in September. Wait. August. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. And then we got September Night Skies, EQ8R, and Live Stack for Outreach. And we have Stephen Bisk from Software Bisk as our presenter at this time for the end of September, I believe, is what we've got there. So lots of stuff lined up. But again, thanks for joining us on this Friday morning. Thanks for putting up with our technical issues. And we will see you guys next Friday, New Moon weekend. And we'll see you then. So have a good weekend. Stay safe. Don't blow your hand off. Happy 4th of July. And we will see you guys next week. Take care, everyone.